It's been a minute since we've reviewed a Denon AV receiver, so have they finally fixed their HDMI issues? Are the X Series receivers really better than the S Series? And can the 3700 hang with the Onkyo RZ50? Well, subscribe and hit that like button, and let's find out because we're reviewing the Denon 3700H AV receiver. The X3700H falls in the middle of Denon's more performance-based X Series line of home theater receivers. It's a 9.2 channel surround sound receiver with support for Dolby Atmos and DTS:X. It's rated at 105 watts per channel. Of course, that is only with 2 channels driven. Denon does not disclose the 3700's power ratings with all channels driven, but we know it isn't likely going to be 105 watts. You get 7 HDMI inputs and 3 HDMI outputs. Sadly, only one of those inputs is 8K 60 and 4K 120 capable, with the remaining inputs limited to 4K 60. There are 2 HDMI main outputs and a third HDMI out for use in a second zone. There's support for Dolby Vision, HDR10+, HDR10, and HLG+, a host of features gamers might find useful, like variable refresh rate and low latency modes. You also get AUDYSSEY MULTIEQ XT32 auto room correction, full preamp outputs for 11.2 channels, HEOS wireless connectivity for streaming music and whole home audio, Wi-Fi connectivity, Bluetooth, AirPlay 2, and so much more. Now, setup is pretty straightforward using the on-screen menus. If you're brand new to home theater, I strongly recommend that you use the 3700's step-by-step setup procedure. This guide will help you to know where to place your speakers in your room, as well as tell you how to connect them to the Denon. But for you more advanced users and those familiar with Denon products already, you can jump right in because not much has changed. Now, to get the most out of your speakers, you're going to want to run the AUDYSSEY MULTIEQ room correction procedure first. We ran this procedure through 3 sets of speakers, starting with our Aurora 700 home theater, followed by the Sonus Faber Lumina 2s, and of course our reference monitor audio bronze theater package, all of which produced excellent results. While I would normally only use one subwoofer, I did test the Denon with a pair of SVS 3000 micro subwoofers because, unlike the Onkyo RZ50, the Denon's dual subwoofer outs are independent of one another, which I know is important to a lot of you. And speaking of subwoofers, inside the option menu for AUDYSSEY, there is a feature labeled AUDYSSEY LFC, which stands for Low Frequency Containment. When turned on, this effectively keeps truly deep bass from traveling too far, as in through nearby walls. So you apartment dwellers, this may be a life-saving feature for you. I found its usefulness quite good, but the default setting was just too aggressive for me. So I dialed it back to about 2 or 3, and that was enough to keep it from pissing off the neighbors without completely destroying my bass response. But you can always leave it off for maximum impact. Now, control of the 3700 falls to either the included remote or the Denon AVR remote app. Actually, that's not correct. You can use whatever remote you want since it has control over HDMI. So I relied on our Apple TV remote for day-to-day operation of the 3700's basic control functions. I'm talking functions like volume and input. For higher level adjustments, I primarily use the app. Now, the app is good, but it's a little sluggish, and changes will cause a brief interruption of the Denon's signal, specifically a dropout in sound. So if you want to go from stereo to Dolby Atmos, you can expect a pause in sound. This happens when you use the remote too, so it's not exclusive to the app, but it is something to be aware of. Before we get into sound, let's talk about video. After our review of the S960H last year, I said a silent prayer when it was time to test the 3700's video claims. Using both my Apple TV 4K as well as our PS5, I was happy to see that video switching was relatively quick and painless. Testing 4K 120 with the PS5, the 3700 passed with flying colors. Call of Duty at 4K 120 in HDR worked with no issues. Now, there really isn't any readily available 8K content or players on the market, so any and all 8K signals are going to be scaled. In other words, the jury is still out on just how good or bad the Denon is at 8K. That said, if you're looking for a receiver that offers gaming at 4K 120, at least on a PS5, I have zero hesitation in recommending the 3700 to you. If you're not a gamer and you just want to enjoy 4K content at a high level, the Denon's going to do you just fine. Where I feel the Denon falls short is with limiting the number of HDMI inputs capable of accepting an 8K 60 or 4K 120 signal. You only get one, which makes the 3700 less competitive against other receivers like the RZ50. Moving on to sound quality. Overall, and I cannot stress this enough, the divide between the Denon's S and X series with respect to sound quality is night and freaking day. When it comes to bass, the Denon becomes more confident and resolute after running Odyssey or when using a subwoofer. On its own and across all of the speakers we used in our test, the bass straight out of the box is a tad lighter than the competition, and it can be just a little bit soft with respect to focus and detail. Run Odyssey and things firm up quite a bit and gain a bit of heft. Details and textures also become more intelligible. Use a sub or two and you can expect the bass to be comparable to every other receiver in its class. True, by adding a sub, the Denon isn't really doing any more to give you more bass, but the way Odyssey blends your sub and the bass with your speakers is very impressive, if not completely seamless. So if you have a good subwoofer or two, the Denon isn't going to get in the way or rob your setup of bass extension. The mid-range performance of the 3700 is undeniably Denon. Denon has a sound, a tone, and I don't know how to describe it to you other than to say, if you know, you know. The 3700's mid-range is smooth, dare I say warmish. It's largely non-offensive, though when you directly compare it to other receivers from Onkyo and even Yamaha, you quickly notice its mild coloration and how when it comes to conveying nuance, it's just not quite as sharp. Now, you can go into the paid Odyssey MULTIEQ app and adjust the 3700 sound to be really whatever you want it to be. You can even boost the mids at the touch of a button. But on its own, the mid-range is just really smooth. The highs are smooth, however, at the absolute extremes, there is an inherent digital quality that the 3700 can't completely shake. It sounds like compression. It's sizzly along the edges. Now, this could be inherent to the source material, and you could argue that the Denon is just so transparent to the source that it isn't editorializing, which is valid, and you may ultimately be right. Nevertheless, that sound is there. Is it a deal breaker? No, but it does cost the Denon some natural airiness in the highs. It also keeps the highs somewhat relegated to your speaker's boundaries rather than setting them completely free. Speaking of being set free, the Denon soundstage is vast, be it with music or movies, though the strength of its soundstage rests between the speakers and behind. It is an absolute champ when it comes to soundstage depth, favoring it over width. Center focus is solid, but it isn't laser focused with respect to separation. It's good, but there are other receivers that manage to do better. The good news is the 3700 is by no means the blurry, tubby mess that was the S960H. Now fire up a Dolby Atmos mixed film and the Denon soundstage placement improves and the addition of Atmos channels helps the 3700 to sound more encompassing left to right, not to mention top to bottom. With Atmos mixed content, the 37 is on par with every other receiver I have heard in its class. I was even impressed with the 3700's upmixing of non-Atmos content to virtual Atmos. Its strength in this arena allowed me to basically set the Denon sound profile to Dolby Atmos, Dolby Surround, and move on. Dynamically, the 3700 is good. When fed a complex sequence, the Denon can put you right in the middle of the action. While I still feel that the 3700, like all Denon amps, still errs on the side of being slightly polite rather than going for outright just face-melting violence, at least dynamically, it's still capable of an engaging performance. As for the 3700's drawbacks, obviously there are receivers out there at or near the Denon's price that no longer limit your 8K, 4K, 120 capability to just one HDMI input. With respect to 4K 120, at least the 3700 works. Denon's own HEOS platform, that's bound to be a matter of personal taste with respect to whether you like it or not. I'm not the biggest fan, but that is entirely personal to me. But if you fire it up, find it to be a little clunky or not as modern as other solutions, let you know you're not alone. I would have liked to see a more updated on-screen menu, especially if Denon wants to catch up with Sony. When you're trying to sell consumers on next-gen video features, I think the graphics on screen should match. But apart from those minor gripes, the 3700 is pretty solid. As for other receivers, the more expensive ROTEL 1580 and NAD T778 definitely have a more refined, dare I say, hi-fi sound. If that was the only thing that mattered to me with respect to choosing an AVR, they are still on my audition list. But they are also way more expensive, and you are paying a lot for what amounts to maybe a 10 or 15% improvement in sound quality. maybe even less when it comes to movies. As much as I enjoyed both the ROTEL and the NAD, I'm probably saving my money and going with something like the 3700. Compared to Yamaha's new AVENTAGE line, more specifically the A8A, which we have, I might be team Denon at the moment due to the fact that the A8A is a little more than a repackaged 3080 from several years ago and not at all up to date with respect to its video capabilities. I know I loved the 3080, and I still do, but if I'm shopping for a new receiver, I want a new receiver, and the Yamaha AVENTAGE line is proving to be anything but. With respect to less expensive options, such as the Denon S960H, Onkyo 5100, or the Yamaha V6A, if you can stretch your budget, I think at a minimum, at least within the Denon family of products, save your pennies and buy an X Series anything over the S Series. The same goes for the 5100 and V6A. Honestly, seeing as how the X Series starts at around $1,000 for the 2700H, I would consider that the entry point to AVRs, with costlier options like the 3700 and Onkyo RZ50 representing the point where the law of diminishing returns really starts to kick in. Speaking of Onkyo, when I buy the Denon over my current reference receiver, the RZ50, I wouldn't. The Denon can hang, no question, and if you need true dual subwoofer outs and you prefer Odyssey MULTIEQ to other solutions, by all means, you should buy the Denon. For me, I like Dirac better than Odyssey, and that's coming from an OG Odyssey Pro user. I think Dirac results in a more organic and neutral sound, at least to these ears. The Onkyo has more next-gen HDMI inputs, whereas you're limited with the Denon. Will users ultimately need more 8K, 4K 120 inputs? Who knows? But it's nice knowing that you won't be limited should the need arise, especially considering the receivers cost basically the same. Aside from the Onkyo RZ50, I would get the Denon over just about everything else that I've reviewed so far this year at or near its price point. I think the 3700 is pretty great. While it's not the best or most comprehensive AV receiver in its class, it has enough of what the competition lacks in some very key areas that I believe it's still competitive. If you're already a fan of Denon or have owned Denon products in the past, the 3700H is a no-brainer. If the 3700H is available, and boy does that seem to be a question surrounding a lot of audio products nowadays, and its feature set speaks to you, I would grab it. You'd be buying a pretty solid performer, one that will no doubt thrill you for the foreseeable future. So that's it. That is now my review of the Denon X3700H, but now it's time to find out if Kristi liked it.
I did. Honestly, this is the first Denon product that we've reviewed in quite a while that I actually enjoyed. I mean, the last one that I can recall was the PMA 150H.
Oh, wow.
That was way back in the day.
Yeah, deep cut.
Yeah, super deep cut. And I really did like that. But then after that, like everything else we reviewed by Denon, I found pretty boring. So yeah, to be honest, I was pretty surprised that I even liked the 3700, you know, and I'm maybe even more surprised at how similar I think the 3700 sounds to the Onkyo RZ50 in some respects.
Yeah.
Especially if you leave Odyssey turned off.
Okay.
They sound a little bit closer.
Yeah. I think Odyssey brings in a little bit more of a bass bump or boost compared to what Dirac does.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. When you turn Odyssey on, you definitely get a fuller sound from the Denon, and I think that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to like that.
Oh, for sure.
You know, but yeah, I'm not going to lie. At first, I was like, wait a minute, do I like this better? Am I actually a fan of Denon? You know, but then when we were listening to Stone Temple Pilots' Creep, when you really pay attention and you really have to be just silly analytical at this point. But when we were listening to that song, Creep, you start to hear some sibilance in certain words that he's singing. And there were also parts of the chorus that sound more recessed when you're listening to the Denon versus the Onkyo. Now, look, what representation is right or correct? Honestly, I mean, the only people that can tell you are the musicians themselves.
Yeah, the musicians or producers, yeah.
as far as what I want to personally hear, I would rather hear or rather listen to the Onkyo.
Okay.
General movie watching, there's so much happening in a movie that I don't know that you're really going to pick apart those kinds of things.
Yeah, I don't think so. In a 2-channel environment, I think it is easier to determine or distinguish little differences, like you said, between, say, something like an Onkyo or Denon. But if you are just going to be using something to watch movies, these two products are neck and neck.
Yeah.
Neck and neck.
Totally. I would 100% agree with you. I mean, all in all, I think it's a good receiver. And I wouldn't have any hesitation in recommending it to somebody that's shopping. At some point, it's just going to come down to personal preferences, like you talked about.
Yeah.
Now, the only other thing I think is kind of worth mentioning is the whole issue surrounding the HDMI board. Now, thankfully, Denon has finally owned up that there were HDMI issues. Roll the tape. We called that out in the 960 review, and
something was wrong.
And boy, were we they
didn't like us very much for doing that.
No, they flat out held it against us. But so they've come out with this adapter thing.
Yes.
So if you have the older model, like one that came out early in 2020,
right,
you can, I believe, for free, get this adapter thing that will remedy the HDMI board problems that are inherent to basically everything Denon and every Denon model.
Oh, every Denon and every AV receiver from 2020. Every AV receiver that was manufactured in 2020 that predates probably the early part of this year is affected.
Yeah.
And it's a breakout box. It's literally looks like an Apple TV with some 3 or 4 inputs in it, and you use those if you need 8K, 4K 120 capability. If you're still on just Team 4K 60, you don't need to worry about any of this.
Yeah, but you should get the box.
But the box,
you're getting what So you're getting what you paid for.
Right.
And I'll put a link down in the description.
Yes.
For those of you who maybe didn't know there was a box available or whatever, you'll be able to go get it.
Yeah.
Now my biggest concern was, as a consumer, how would anybody know especially if you're shopping now?
Yeah.
Like, how are you going to know whether or not you're getting one of the new models that
updated models.
Updated models that already has this new board inside,
right?
Or are you going to end up with something that's like leftover stock from when it first came out? Now, we reached out to Denon to find out how do you know about this? So if you're buying something new and the serial number ends with 7,000 or greater,
70,000.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, 70,000. There was an extra zero there. 70,000 or greater.
Yes.
You're good.
Yes.
Nothing to worry about. Your unit has the updated board already inside.
Do not need the breakout box. You should be ready to rock and
Now,
roll.
if you end up with a number that's below 70,000, you do have one of the older units and you would need a breakout box.
Correct.
To solve this issue.
Yeah.
So basically, I think to be safe, you're going to want to buy something that is not open box.
Yes.
Or a B stock.
Yes.
As much as I know we all like to save a buck or two, this is not the time to do it.
Yeah, this is one instance where I think you're going to want to make doubly sure that you are buying a brand new factory sealed box, because the likelihood is, if you're doing that at a authorized Denon retailer, you will be getting a new unit. But you could also, depending on who you're ordering it from, or if you're in a store and physically holding the box, you can check the serial number on the box, or have someone on the phone or email or whatever check it for you and make sure that your unit, the last 5 digits are over 70,000. And it can be like 70,001. You got a new unit. But if you're like 68,000 and change, that has the old board. And unfortunately, if you want to continue with that purchase, you will then have to fill out the form and get the breakout box, because that is all Denon is offering you in terms of a fix. So brand new, factory sealed from an authorized retailer with a serial number greater than 70,000, you can expect to have the performance that we talked about in this review. If you get something pre that, your mileage may vary when it comes to video. I think the sound is going to be exactly the same, but your mileage may vary with video.
The only other thing I would want to bring up is you touched on dynamics in the review, and I completely agree with you. I felt like you had to turn the volume up a little bit more on the Denon in order to really, like you said, sort of get more face melting from it, performance from it, versus the Onkyo.
Yeah,
I think the Onkyo is a little bit more engaging at the lower volumes.
Yeah, the Onkyo is mildly more powerful, if memory serves me, but the way with which the Onkyo delivers the power is more confident at lower or moderate volumes. Once you get up into, like, say, the 85 plus dB range, there's virtually no difference between these two products. But if you're listening at the upper 60s to low 70 dB range, the Onkyo, I think, is hands down more engaging.
Yeah. I mean, the Denon will get there.
Oh, yeah.
You just got to, give it a little push.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's
but
always,
other than that, pretty similar.
I have to say, I like you, probably within half an hour of playing around with this thing, I was like, okay. Yeah, this is solid.
So would you recommend the Denon then over the Onkyo if you're brand new to home theater?
If you're brand new to home theater, I think the Denon might be a little bit more plug and play and a little bit easier to just jump right in. If you have two gaming consoles, like say you have an Xbox and a PlayStation 5, that's where the Denon is really going to limit you. If you're not in that camp, then the Denon may be the better kind of starter receiver. But if you're like, okay, I want performance at an exacting level, I want the better room correction, I'm willing to work a little bit for it, and I don't want to be limited in terms of my video future, Onkyo hands down.
All right.
Anything else?
Nope, I think we got it covered.
All right, that is now our review of the Denon X3700H. What did you guys think? Let us know down in the comments below. And while you're down there, question of the day for you, pretty simple. But I want to know, what matters most to you? The dual sub outputs of the Denon, or do you prefer to have more next-gen HDMI inputs? What feature would get you to sign on the dotted line? Let me know. I'm curious. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Ring that bell so that you're notified when new videos come out. If you use any of the links that Kristi left for you down below, know that that's a great way that you've continued to show your support for this channel, as well as retailers who are dedicated to growing this hobby the right way. Follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile, and that's it. That is it. A positive Denon review in the books. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next video. Bye.